Hi friends, Eric again here with talking about game making adventures of me who's making video games. Hi. Let's just start talking and see how everything develops and goes and yeah. Witcher 7, no more discount, at least for now. The Steam summer sale is over. Summer is still ongoing, but the sale is gone. But you can still buy the game. Would be cool if people buy the game. Would be... Like, the phrase would be even cooler if you write a positive review, but no, not really. Like, I'd still like people like given the choice between people buying the game and writing a positive review, I take buying the game at any point. But you know, that's the problem. The SEO like makes you think that, oh no, you need to do the positive review. Regardless, if you have bought the game on Steam and if you had a good time with it, please write a positive review. I'm at 7. I need 3 more so that it gets like a rating thing displayed on the site, which may or may not make a difference in things. Who knows? But yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, let's talk about the stuff that's more fun than selling video games, because honestly, the worst part about making video games is the selling part of it all. Because it's not making video games, I guess. Questions arise from that statement that I'm not equipped right now to answer properly. So, last week there was no like video of all of this and the progress, that's the word, progress on a JRPG game, because I basically spent the entirety of the previous week just building the test dungeon and putting down tile sets, and there was nothing to talk about. Like nothing really about like new insights about making a JRPG or like building dungeons or like thinking about how systems create certain things. It was just like, yeah, I sat down and then pressed hold down the left mouse button for like 10 minutes, looked at it and decided, that's not looking good. So then I spent like another hour placing some pixels slightly different in like Sprite to see if the tile sets would then look slightly different, and then I would change the palette of the tile sets around to see if that might make a difference. And the one thing I want to say about all of that was that one big thing I noticed was that I have to rewrite my brain around making spaces, but also making graphics for a game with a more top-down perspective rather than a side-scroller. Because, well, things have to look different and have to be constructed differently for them to work. I mean, they would still work technically in a top-down setting, because at the end of the day, everything is just a plane, right? Doesn't really matter. It just doesn't look quite right. There's also for example, stuff okay, how thick does a wall have to be for it to look interesting and all that kind of stuff, and how many graphics does an area need. So there was a lot of tiny revisions and going through it again and looking at things and slowly working myself into something where I think, okay, now it looks decent, but it was rough. It was really rough. It reminded me of the pre-GB Rover days of making levels in Game Maker, just or even the early Virtua 7 days of it just taking hours just to make a space. So that was kind of frustrating and exhausting, but like it gave me good idea about like how long it might take me to make like a dungeon for like a larger game. And in parts this is why I'm doing this, right? To like get an idea of like, okay, what does this need? Like what kind of problems do I run into? Like, and how can I make sure, and how can I set things up in such a way that where can I cut corners? Where can I speed things up? Where can I make things more efficient? How can I set things up in such a way that I don't have to do like 5 revisions to like get a tile set right? Like how do I have to like pre-plan these like in a better way? And how do I build basically spatial rules around this stuff? All things that I had at the end with Virtua 7, which is why like at the end it was like fairly straightforward for me to make a new area, or like make areas and build them out and change the graphics around like retroactively even. But none of that existed here, so it was like a lot of tedious stuff. Still not fully happy with it. Like I'm also running into some problems with the color palette that I'm using, because it has some gaps in it. Between like it doesn't have a lot of blues, for example. It has a lot of slightly differently shaded reds. Also I'm colorblind, so who knows if what I think is green is actually green. That's another problem that I always have when I'm using colors that are like, again, like something on the like yellow, green, red spectrum. The problem I have is that green and yellow are like almost always the same, give or take. But yeah, yeah, so that was a problem, and that was like work and issues and whatever, and tedious, but I got it done. Then there was like the process of like, okay, putting down the encounters and building that. And basically at this point I have like the whole test dungeon exists. You start at a point, there are like different paths and branches you can go down to where you like find something, or like have to fight additional fights or whatever. And at the end there's a boss fight that you fight, and then it's over. And it takes me around like 35 to 40 minutes. I think my best time was like 32 minutes to get through. A character died once in that whole process. And yeah, so that's nice. It is playable. Most of the enemies look the same. There's no real music. I have a placeholder battle theme that I'm using right now. Music is a whole different topic that I'll mention a bit later on. But yeah, that's all stuff that exists and happens. So let's just like go through things that I found interest, or like other things that I did. Like, so one thing, I don't even know why I did this. Like now I can't remember my reasoning, but at some point this week I got this idea, or like this thought of like, so one mechanic that I really like in the Forged in the Dark family of tabletop games, so Blades in the Dark, Beam Saber, and others like it, is the ability as a character to push yourself. That in Forged in the Dark is usually tied to like a stress mechanic, where like a character takes on stress, which is kind of like a secondary health bar, which has its own like set of consequences that occur when you like fill it up. So you take on stress and you get like an extra dice or an extra die, so like a higher likelihood for your chance, like for your move to succeed. I like this as a way for characters both to perform actions that their stats might be lacking slightly behind, but also just as a way to take more risks, right? To just like be a bit more reckless in things, and just like play with the resources that you have. I've been thinking quite a lot, like for a long time. Again, like this is like this whole project is like based on like years of me thinking about ways on how to like get stuff from tabletop games that are like into video game RPGs, but also like ways to make this entire thing like quick or quicker and stuff like that. And so I've been thinking a lot about like who I would like to have a way to like get a push mechanic into this battle system. Now, the problem is, like, I mean, there are dice rolls happening in the game, but it's not very upfront, and it's not very, like, it doesn't have, like, a huge impact. It does have sometimes an effect on, like, whether or not you can hit an enemy, but it's not, like, huge. Your, like, character-based stats and the enemy's defense are much more important there than, like, the dice roll. So it's not really, I can't really do a push mechanic for the dice roll, because that's like, okay, you do something and like very likely it doesn't really have an effect, so why occur additional consequences to you? So what I did instead, and this is also, I think in partially, I ended up in this area because I noticed how sometimes the battles took a bit too long. Or like there was a risk of battles taking too long, because while you only basically you were like a few points short of killing an enemy in a single turn, so you had to like go through a whole nother thing. So I thought, why not tie this push mechanic not into like a higher chance of hitting or like higher chance of succeeding, but like your damage output. Because the other idea, or like the other side of it all, was like, okay, what do I do as a negative? Do characters like, is there like a stress system or something similar, or like how do I deal with that? And like I ended up with something where like you can now, there are like 2 steps that you can take. You can push yourself once or twice with each action that you take. So like if you do an attack, like once you're like in the target select state, you can then push a button and like basically push yourself or like reduce it again. And what this does is that it either multiplies or like it increases your outgoing damage, but it also increases the damage you receive. The important part here, and this is like again where like the way I've set things up and deliberately set things up are now creating like interesting interactions with one another. All of this also affects the amount of healing you get, you receive, and you deal out. So if like a character uses a potion on another character and pushes themselves, the potion would heal more damage. If that character that you're healing had pushed themselves before that, they would get even more like healing, because basically they're like again the damage is increased, and healing is just negative damage, thus it's also increased. And again, goes like for healing, this goes then twofold, which is an interesting mechanic, is an interesting way, and like when I played through the dungeon with all of this in place, it was really interesting, because now like the healing, the very weird and sparse healing that you had was suddenly much more effective, because characters could push themselves. There was also like an interesting new layer into it, where like pushing helps speeding up fights, but it's also like there's also a layer of risk involved, because pushing does nothing for your chance to actually hurt an enemy. Like again, the whole battle system is built around, okay, enemies have specific defenses, and your action has to get through that defense value in order to actually deal any damage. And if it doesn't manage to do that, you deal no damage at all. So it's a very like, either you deal full damage or you deal no damage. There is no partial damage that you do here. So if you like attack an enemy, push yourself and then attack an enemy, and that enemy has a very high whatever physical defense value, and you deal no damage, you kind of like uh, put yourself in a worse position in terms of like potential like damage you receive and got nothing for it. On the other hand, that also works for the character, right? Because the enemy also has to penetrate the character's defense. So you can push a character, deal damage to like a specific enemy type, knowing that that enemy type has no means to, like with their attack, to actually hurt that character. Or you can set it up in such a way that they're like basically invincible, but can deal higher damage. And also the push effect stacks with additional things that increase damage. For example, helping and pushing further increases all of that. So you can actually like make fights much quicker. And again, there's like this nice layer of potential hubris involved where like where you can imagine a player saying, oh, I don't know, like I'm just gonna push myself, like what's gonna hurt me, and then suddenly getting into a situation where like maybe they should have been a bit more careful. So there's all of this now in place, and I think this is like really ties nicely into like the rest what I want to do. That part, the other part that I realized when I play through the dungeon is how important items are because of the way the special move system works, which usually you need at least one turn in order to like get the resources to perform special moves and like alter an enemy's defense stats, or like change like a character around, or like buff them, debuff them, and whatever. But with items, you have access to means to do that in the first turn of a battle, which again speeds up the whole process. And there's a huge difference in terms of like, because like at the end doing a dungeon is just like a question of resource management and like managing what type of resource is being drained while you go through each encounter in the dungeon towards its end. Having this and understanding that, okay, I can use a specific item to finish off this specific encounter in one turn instead of two, which means that I'll overall receive less damage, which is going to further reduce the pressure on like my healing resources, which are fairly limited in general right now. Again, overall, this has to be balanced in some way or another. Right now, it's not balanced at all, but it's something I just noticed for myself. Well, like just being able again, and it makes sense, being able to like finish a fight one turn, a whole turn earlier, or even 2 turns earlier, if you're like if you're very effective, just means that like sure you might use a specific item more or like lose those items, but it means that characters might not die, or it means that you don't use up your potions, which means you don't have to use the healing action that puts you into inventory debt and all these kinds of things. So again, there's it's just nice to see these things like kind of like hooking into each other, and then seeing, okay, how does this hook, or how does this then change the whole like weird machine of things that I've like created here, and that I don't really right now really fully understand how it actually like what it actually produces in the end. It's a weird thing where like I created this like I created a Rube Goldberg machine without really knowing what comes out at the end. I have like this thing, I press the button and then something happens. I know what I put in place at each step, but the end result is something right now I don't really understand because I haven't really done anything like it before. And in general, I'm very driven by, and this might be a flaw sometimes. Like, again, who knows? But I rarely. There are like intended consequences that I have in mind, but it's hard for me to keep this all in my brain at once, and be able to logically think these things through and understand how each of these things will affect the ultimate outcome of it all. So what I have to do is I really have to build this thing in such a way that where I think it will do the thing that I want to express, while not really knowing if it will work, and then just having to see what happens and then go back and adjust things. I mean, in a way you have to do it always, but I always feel like other people are much more planned in that. But maybe this is just me assuming things about others. Who knows? But this is how I run into making games. It's very much yeah, I think this will work. Who knows? I hope it'll work. And then most of the time it's mostly fine. But for a game like this, it's so much more important to get right. To get this controlled drain of resources, and these specific this flow of where you direct this drain of resources, or where you give the players tools to direct this flow. This is so important for this, because if you're not careful either, you end up with something where players are just not able to get through it, and and get you don't want players to get scared of using up their resources, and you also don't want them. You don't want this to be boring. I feel like a lot of the time, and in a way, now I'm kind of flipping around. You want what you don't want. Let's put it this way, or what I don't want for this dungeon to be at the end is something where, if we're doing an encounter, is just the player rolling their eyes and then knowing, okay, I have to press the A button 8 times in a row for this to be over, and there are no decisions to be made in this span of time that will make a substantial difference in the outcome of it all. Because for me, this is again, this is just boring. You're not really engaging with what makes these games interesting, which is being confronted with an encounter. And even if it's simple in terms of okay, an enemy just takes two hits to be dispatched of, but because of a specific combination of enemies and specific things you have to do in order to dispatch said enemy in that amount of time, there's still a short amount, or a short sequence of there's a short decision making tree that you have to go down. Something where where you see 3 enemies and say, okay, this enemy can be dispatched with this set of moves very quickly. However, these moves make that other enemy incredibly painful to deal with, because they're exactly the opposite of what that one needs, or kind of not really what they need. Or suddenly an enemy that under other circumstances is not a big deal and can easily be ignored, to be picked up the last in a different encounter formation, suddenly becomes the most the highest priority target. There's and again, these are this all depends on what the enemies are able to do, how you combine these abilities in these encounters, and then also which tools the players have, both in terms of permanent resources that they can use, and also temporary resources that they can use. Temporary resources here being items. So there's a lot that you have to consider when you end up building this exactly. And right now, this entire dungeon is just vibes based. Basically, the encounter is just me thinking, yeah, I think this could be funny. There's one encounter in that dungeon that's just incredibly painful to deal with. It's awful. It's just there once, but And I completely forgot that I put it in there, and maybe I didn't even realize when I build it that it is awful. But like when I did my test playthrough yesterday and I ran in, I was just like, oh please no, not this one. So it's like, again, interesting. And then there's another whole nother layer of like, okay, and how much of this information, especially in terms of like enemy weaknesses and what enemies can do and all that kind of stuff and their stats, are you gonna open up to the players? Because that's like, again, that also then depends on like, or like changes how they will approach an enemy, or yeah. So there's a lot to think about, and not a lot of what I've actually really sat down and figured out. Again, it's a lot of it right now is vibes based, which is fine for like testing things out and feeling things out and just seeing how this whole process works. But again, for me, the worst thing at JRPG, and I think this is like something a lot of indie JRPGs, that at least those that I've played, have gotten like not gotten right, is to make the random encounters interesting, to make that process interesting, or like to think that, oh yeah, okay, we don't have random encounters, but then we don't think about, like, haven't really thought about or considered what not having random encounters does to a space, and how you should then or need to then build the encounters that you put on the overworld map. So there's, and again, like I don't want to presume things on people like other people who have made their games, where I'm pretty sure they did make deliberate decisions, but very, very often in these games, again, from my experience, it felt like, oh well, again, either a random encounter was like, or the encounters were way too complex, way too complicated, and took way too many like specific deliberate actions, or it was like way too much in the other direction, where like basically all you had to do was like press the attack button like 5 times in a row and like watch some animations play. And you really have to find a good balance here. And like, again, going back to dungeon encounters, I think dungeon encounters does a really, really good job here, because in a way it does a really good job there because it shows the enemy stats, because it directly shows you, okay, this is how many hits like you need to do on that enemy to get rid of them. You don't know what the enemies are gonna do. That's completely hidden for you, and this is stuff you have to learn. But you can immediately see like what your actions will do. So that's maybe something I have to consider. Again, like this is like also one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos, because like while I'm talking through this stuff, I'm sometimes noticing things that I feel are important for me to consider about like problems I have to deal with. But anyway, the dungeon exists. Like, in a way, this is playable. In a way, I could put this on itch and show it to people. I won't do that because it's not very presentable in any way. And you could make an argument like, why is it important for this to be presentable? And in a way, it isn't. But also, at the end of the day, the tweaking of the numbers is something that can be done. It takes a long time, but the process and the steps that you need to take to like change a number in the game is very simple. You go in the code and change the number. All that other stuff, like doing the graphics, doing the animations, doing like figuring out how you want the attacks to look like, sound effects, music, narrative, all of that stuff, it takes so much longer, and is much more involved in terms of like making revisions. So in that sense, and because this is meant as a test for like how it would feel to make something like it, and trying to extrapolate from there like how it would feel to make it into a larger project, all of these other things, doing the tile sets, doing the narrative stuff and all that, also has to be done and this is why I can't just like go and like, yeah, here's like this placeholder filled game. Please play it to me and tell me if it's interesting to play, because there are like a lot of the layers that makes these games interesting to play don't exist, or like are very rudimentary. And I do consider like animations and sound effects to be part of that, even though like one of the big things I pull from is dungeon encounters, which is very sparse. But I think still does like a lot to communicate like how attacks perform, and like is still very deliberate there. So shows it's still important. It has to be like within the constraints of whatever you're making. Anyway, so which is why what I'm calling right now is like entering the scary zone, because now I have to make definitive decisions about things. Before this week or last week, a lot of what I built was like very, yeah, this could be anything. Like this enemy can be anything. It just like does things. And the important things is that it does the things that I want it to do, and not like how it looks, what it's called, or like the dungeon already involved. Like the first thing I did, or like the first like big narrative, like larger narrative, definitive narrative decision I had to make was like when I was thinking about, okay, what do I want this dungeon to be? Like, because you're building the narrative framing for the for the rest. Because the space you traverse frames what's happening inside of that space, because you know it's the frame around it, and that can't be like vague, right? Because, or like, even if I were to keep it vague, like it would still like frame the rest of the narrative around it. And also it would like, it's important to do these things right, because it's part of like what a JRPG is. Like the dungeons are part of it. Like the way a dungeon is like grounded in the world that it's like, in the like story that it's part of. And the story it tells through the space that you're traversing is much part of like the overall narrative structure as is like who you're fighting and what like an attack is called or whatever. So I had to make like the first decision there. Again, I have like a vague idea of like what I want to do and what I would like the narrative, like again, like extrapolating this into a larger thing, or like even as the smaller thing. What I wanted it to be. So I had to make a decision there. I couldn't keep it vague, because that would make the rest kind of like vague. And I again, in order to really properly test this, I need this to test this like with everything that I think would be, or like had to be in like if I were to make like a larger commercial JRPG game. So that had to be done. Thinking about the boss also was like a large decision, because I had to think about ways to like who would be that boss, how would that be expressed, like the type of thing the boss is, how would that be expressed, what like is this just like a larger blob, or is this like does it say something more? And I found a really nice thing in the game systems that I and that was like a few weeks ago already, where I like realized, wait a second, I can use this part of like the game's damage and like whatever system and defense system to say something about the differences between the group of beings that the boss is from and where the players come from. And that's a fundamental difference between these two. So, and that was cool. And now I had to actually build it, which was like, interestingly, much more complicated than I thought, but it exists, and that's cool. But there's still things left, like what's the boss called? What does it look? What do they look like? How do they talk? How much dialogue is there gonna be? How will the dialogue be framed? Whatever. So there's like a lot of stuff that now needs to be specific. What was before vague, and where it was okay for it to be vague because it wasn't really, it wasn't all that important, and to be specific, because again, like other things had to be done like before that. But now the dungeon exists, the narrative, like the narrative of the space exists, the framing of like what you're supposed to be doing there exists, the characters exist, the boss exists, and now this all has to be brought together and like has to be specified as much as possible. And that's again, that's always scary, because you move from the place where like it could be everything, like because again, imagination is only limited by what you think is possible. And even then, again, you can theoretically imagine everything that you can think of, and it can exist, it could exist. The moment you have to like try and make this is like where you then realize what's actually possible with what you can do and what you can achieve. And that's the interesting space where creative compromises have to be made, where decisions have to be made, where things have to become material and real and scary, because suddenly it's not just something where you can in your head just think, oh, this is gonna be great. Suddenly you see it and it might actually not be great, and that's scary. Or like you wonder, oh, what if this isn't good? Do I really want to see this for real and realize that it's not good? I do like this fuzzy state of like rotating an idea in my head around so much that maybe I just want to do that for all the time. And that's fine, but like again, the moment you want to make something, you have to confront that part. And you have to confront yourself with like, okay, and if it's not good, why is it not good? What does that even mean? And how could you like turn this into something that is closer to what you want to achieve? Or like maybe you realize it's completely not possible, but how can you still like make something out of whatever it is that you've put out there, right? And that's the scary process, because again, it gets very close to yourself, because like at the end of the day, your like creative ideas are like expressions and like reflections of who you are. And then comes the whole other problem, or the whole other side of like having other people see that, which is like a whole nother layer of like terrifying sometimes. But yeah, so this is like something that I now have to do. I think like I talked about it 2 weeks ago already. I'm now again much closer to it, because well, again, you can play through the whole thing, like it's there, like all that are basically the things that are left to do for it to like be in the state that I would like it to be, are all the things that are like scary and require like hard decisions and questions and like things that are much more uncomfortable for me to put out, because again, there's like a layer of like me not trusting certain things. But it has to be done, because otherwise the game wouldn't exist. And the game has to exist. I can't, like, again, this whole thing, all of it, I enjoy working on it for too much that I don't want to make something there. And again, that means having to deal with all of these things. So but yeah, there's like then this question like on the in this whole cascade of things where you're thinking about, okay, I want to do something as like a test thing. A test for what, right? What's this gonna be? What is this supposed to be? Where will this all lead? And yeah, what I'm saying here is like, for me personally, I would like for this to be something where I can then see again, do this kind of like as a production test for myself to see, okay, this is the type of work that would be required. These are the things that I like can like have to like adjust in the production process, basically, to make them a bit more breezy, for like, so that maybe building a dungeon wouldn't take an estimated month or like 2 weeks to do, but can be, how can I make this quicker, right? For that. But also, like, if you do that, like, you don't do that if you're not also thinking about like doing, like, again, doing it as a larger project. Doing it as a larger project means, oh well, this is probably going to be another commercial game, huh? That sucks, because, well, just look at me begging for people to buy my last commercial video game, which is like only barely working. And this whole thing is just, especially on your own, is incredibly frustrating, but also like I don't have resources to hire other people, so like what am I doing here? And like, especially, I can do most of this in some form or another on my own and probably be okay. What's right now is causing me the most like just exhaustions of just thinking about it is music, because oh my god, not again. Like, Virtuous Heaven was already a struggle to like basically it took me 2 years to like cobble together enough tracks so that this game has a soundtrack. And wow, was it a struggle. Like there are some tracks that are really that I'm proud of that are in Virtuous Heaven soundtrack, but a lot of it was just hard and frustrating, and like also, this is a weird thing, but like I'm getting like a ringing in my ear when I'm doing chiptunes now, which is like happened like to like at around March. So I'm trying to not do it because it's just like yesterday I was like going through like I have a bunch of like old stuff that I was just like looking, okay, is there something in this pile of music that I haven't used that could be used for this thing? And nothing fit what I felt it needed, and my ears started to ring again just from listening to it. And it's weird. I don't have it usually, but it happened there, and I don't know, like maybe it's something in the frequency or something that like my ears just don't agree anymore with it. So there's like that part where like working on music is like just like not a very pleasant outlook right now for me. It could make an argument, why does it have to be chiptunes? Well, I do not like pixel art games that have orchestral or like MIDI soundtracks. MIDI, it depends on like how it is, right? But like I have like it is there's something like where like it just for me it doesn't feel right when it's, again, when you have like low resolution graphics and like a very specific way of how the game looks, and then there's just like fake violence playing in the background. It's just like strange for me. So I try to not do it, and also like I don't have the software and whatever for it, so isn't gonna work anyway. But if I don't want to make the music myself, well, someone else has to do it, right? And that requires paying people. Now I have a bit of money because well, I did sell some copies of Virtuous Heaven, so I do have some money that I could use for that, but that's still like for the test thing it's enough. It's definitely not enough to pay like prospectively, like think about, oh, and then we spin this out into a larger project. Well, there's no like I at this point don't have the funds for stuff like that. So it would be we can see like 2 tracks for this, and like if there's money we can do more, and if not, well, I don't know. And that's, I always feel bad about, like, it's hard to approach people or like to commission people for work when you're like, when you don't have any money, because there's always like, there's like on my side this a degree of shame behind it, because I feel people need to be paid fairly, and I can't. At the same time, I really need help with a specific thing. So like like striking this balance is difficult in my own head, and like usually like what I'm trying my best to do is like to not break it towards like the person that is supposed to be paid, because like just because I'm having like trouble with like getting the money together doesn't mean that they should take less, because at the end of the day I'm in like in that working relationship, I'm in quotes the boss, as weird as it is to say, but like again in terms of like the relationship between like who pays and like who provides the work and who like in quotes takes it, I am that person, right? So and obviously being a communist, that's like something where you think, yeah, okay, it should not be that like I should go around and say, yeah, sure, like I don't have any money, like why don't you just give it to me for free, and like maybe if the game makes more then you get something. Like there has to be like a balance be found, but also like I have to be upfront with it. So it's like, yeah, paying is hard for me, but like not because I'm cheap, it's because, well, there's nothing here. So that's just like a rough starting point. It's a rough starting point to approach people from there, and especially to approach people from that point, and for example then to hear like, okay, this is what they need, and then realize, yeah, there's no way in hell I can afford this, which, because then it's like, yeah, okay, sorry, can't do that. It's, and this is like, again, it's like, it's in part a material problem because there's no money, in part it's like a mental problem because like there's a degree of shame involved, which should not be, because like my quality as a person is not tied to like the amount of money that I have, but it's still something that you have to deal with and have to figure out. At the same time, in general, I do want to try, and this is like, and this goes back into this whole thing, I really don't want to make another game completely on my own. And that's hard for me to do, again, because like there's no one here who makes games that I know of. Also, I don't, in general, I don't like the German games industry, so like I don't want to talk to these people anyway. So there's that part. Then yeah, okay, then who and how do you like, who is there, like how do you establish anything? And that goes like, this is like then ties into a whole nother layer of things. So there's like a weird thing that like, this is also something I have to confront and like figure a way forward with at some point or another. And maybe this smaller thing can help me here, and like again figuring things out, like how can I find something that works for me here, and like how can I establish things that like work in some way or another. I don't know, but it's something I have to confront, even like regardless of anything, because it's a reality I'm in. And just after Virtuous Heaven, how incredibly exhausting it was to just like finish the game and knowing, well, I was able to finish the game, but like there was no energy and motivation and anything left to market it at all. Like aside from like a few social media posts, there was nothing because I had no energy for it. And it frankly probably hurt it a lot in terms of like how it sold at the beginning. At the same time, well, it did get a lot of like the social media posts went like as well as they could have gone, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, well, there's nothing else I could have done outside of it. And there was not really the biggest problem. There was like there wasn't any energy to accompany that with other things, because I was completely done with everything. And I would like to be in a position in some way where I don't have to exhaust myself on everything with the game anymore, where like I can, where like other people are involved. It's not I don't even want this to be something that's like, okay, oh yeah, other people do the work for me. That's not really what I really want to do. At one point or another is like to collaborate with others, like to really share ideas and like create something together. Sure, like you take this project for example, there's like a lot of stuff that's just like based on my own weird stuff, which obviously if you like, the moment you take other people in, it has to change, and you have to like let go of ideas because, well, someone else is here, or like other people are here and maybe they have different interests. But again, this is something I really would like to figure out a way to do in some way or another. And yeah, again, this is all like part of like a process and like part of like stuff I would like to do, like to figure out. But yeah, probably will try and look for people who make music in some like and reach out to those, because again, just like going back to like just like the process stuff, I would really like to not have to think about that part. Just in that regard. And also again, it would be cool to have someone to have someone else influence this work other than me. And that's also like what happens when someone else makes music, even if it's and that's like a bad thought about it and a bad way of framing this, just the music, right? Because well, everything else is made by that person. But I know it from the previous times where like I worked with someone else who did the music for my game. Splinter Zone the music was made by someone else, and Squiggle as well. And the tracks that I got definitely influenced decisions I made as the games were continued to be made. It wasn't that like, okay, the game's done, now I like plop the music on top of it. Actually, in some way or another, Virtuous Heaven was the game that was like mostly made like this, because I had no money to make enough, like to hire someone like to make an entire soundtrack for that game, because the game was like way too large and required way too much. So I just like for a long time I just didn't think about it, and then as I had to think about it, I was just, again, most of the tracks for Virtuous Heaven were just like, okay, yeah, this kind of like fits, like me basically doing what I did yesterday, going through like the tracks that I like made at some point, where like I managed to like make more than 10 seconds of music before running out of ideas, and then just thinking, yeah, this is kind of like okay, I can put it in here, and then like struggling for like 2 or 3 tracks that I actually had to make because I had nothing for those. So in a way, the soundtrack for Virtuous Heaven is mostly me just like plopping music on top of stuff I've already made that vaguely fits. Whereas like if you have like a composer that kind of like works alongside you as the game gets produced, this has a completely different dynamic and again, it did in the past change things, or like gave me ideas on like how I do certain things. There's like parts in Squiggle, which by the way you should play. It's on my Itch account. It's like a nice drawing thing with like bad controls. And the composer gave me like also sound effects and additional other things. Well, we both were like not quite sure like how they could work. I don't really know the exact process, but like it gave me specific ideas of like what I also want. Like it made me add specific things so that I could put more of those sound effects and more of the music in, and to like make more like with it. And it made overall it improved what was already there, not only because wow there was now sound, but also because it made me it caused me to do additional things to the game, because again the things that I got again, like, and this is like where then the communication happens, even if it's just a very, oh well, yeah, I need these 3 tracks for this stuff, is like roughly that still influences it. Obviously, like, again, there's like stuff you wish to do, but like in some way or another, just like collaborating with someone else would be nice. Be it music or elsewhere, but yeah, that's like something I will try and look into, because again, I have some money, and like because of the like summer sale, there's like still something coming in. I want to be a bit careful with it, because it is a bit, but it's not a lot, and there's like always like the looming threat of, I don't know, something breaking in my apartment. I'm scared that my fridge breaks, or like my stove or something, that like something like a household appliance that's expensive to replace. And right now it wouldn't be a problem because I have the Virtuous Heaven money. If I don't have it, it would be a problem. And I lived for like a month with no fridge at one point, like about a decade ago, a bit more than a decade ago, and it was awful. And I don't want to have it again. So, not that it's, who knows, really. I mean, it's the same fridge, and it's very old, but again, there's funds there, but I'm also like scared of using it because, well, I know there's not much coming after that one, or like it will take a while to accumulate. Also, in case if you're wondering, like, why the hell does Witches Heaven cost 20 euros or like $20? That's the reason. So like, even if I just like sell like 2 copies, like, I have to sell like 4 times the amount, or like during the Steam sale, I would have to like sell like 4 copies of GB Robo to make the same amount of money as like 1 copy of Witches Heaven. So it's awful. I don't like doing this with high prices. Is like a completely different thing, but like, I hate it. I'm poor. I don't like it. I don't like for indie games to cost $20 or 20 euros. But also, it helps me get a Steam payout a bit quicker, and that money is, oh my god, you have no idea how nice it is to occasionally have like 100 euros more. It's nice. And it's awful that you have to calculate like that, but anyway, I digress, and I'm kind of done anyway. So next things, like this is what I'll do next week, is the narrative and the dialogues and all of that stuff, because that's what I feel like right now is the most important, to like have something in there, like to start making these things more precise, because otherwise, like, and again, what I think the most about when I'm making my games is like the narrative, like how all of these actions are like framed in like some way or another to tell a story, or like tell something or express something, and the less it is in the game, the more I start looking for holes in what I'm currently have like built out in my mind, and like deconstructing it again and reconstructing it. And so it's important for me to like have it in the thing, so that it's harder for me to go in there and like fiddle around with it, or like if I have to fiddle around with it, that I can only fiddle around like on the margins and not like on the larger structures. And also, again, like making decisions, making like set decision, and just saying, okay, this is what it's gonna be, and I'm not gonna change these things, is important. So this is like why I want to do this now. What I did today was like I actually built like a small, like very simple like cutscene thing, where like, you know, that thing in like JRPGs like SNES JRPGs or like others, where like they walk across a dungeon and then suddenly like the party splits out and like talks about something. I did something like that, so you can where like you can basically also like specify like how is the party gonna form up. Are they forming a circle to talk where the characters talk to each other, or like are they talking to like a different character like at a different place? So I built that. That's kind of nice. It made me also realize that I kind of enjoy building these foundations. One thing that I really like about this project right now is like building all of these foundations, building like in a way tools for me to make the things easier later. It's something, again, because I haven't really done that ever. It's something I really enjoy about this. About this all, and like having this and then seeing it and see how easy it would be for me to like play around with this and like do it like that is cool. So I did that today and then just like hung around, and now I'm doing this video because, well, I had to do something today to feel like I was busy. And yeah, and that's that. It's again, it's really exciting for me to work on this. I've now hit the tedious zone, or the scary zone, as I said it earlier, but it's still I'm still excited about the things that I'm doing here and the reasons why I'm doing them. And I'm still excited to like I want these things out there for others to be seen because they excite me, and I would like for others to see them as well. It's not like everyone can just sit in their chair and just imagine something cool. And that's nice, but like you cannot share it. Like, and again, this is like why I'm making these videos, because there's stuff that I'm like, especially in the last few weeks, that I've been working on, where I've then been sitting here in my room and it's just like, I just want to talk to someone about this. This stuff has to go somewhere. I just like want to say, like tell someone how I'm excited about like this very specific thing. But like the problem is like, no matter who I would call here, I would first have to spend 15 minutes explaining to them what I'm doing and why exactly this small thing that I just did is incredibly exciting. And then it might still not land with them because none of them play video games. So it's a living in some way or another. But yeah, no, it's great. It might be tedious and awful, like to like place tiles for like 2 days, but hey, now I have a dungeon. Isn't that great? You can walk around in it and fight little guys and like have your little guys get stronger a little bit, or like open chests and there's something in there. That's cool. That's really cool. And soon there will be a story and like things that happen and people that talk and like and things that, wow, exciting, great. But yeah, that's it. Please buy Witcher 7 and write a positive review. I will use the money for things that I need. For example, paying other people. That would be cool. Buy enough copies so they can then give that money to others. Yeah. Anyway, see you around, everyone. Have a good week. Oh, there I have to stop the recording. Bye.